This is Ken Jaworowski, author of Small Town Sins, and you're watching the Crew Reviews.
Let's raise a glass, everybody. We have Ken Jaworowski in the house.
Yep.
All right.
We also have Jim Thompson as a co-host. Welcome, Jim. Jim's going to help us run this interview.
Thank God somebody's going to do it.
I don't know. Is he more handsome than Sean? I don't know. Look at him.
Ooh, maybe we should run a poll.
Fires across the bow. Sean is our other co-host, but he couldn't make it here. He wished he was here. But
yeah,
I want to thank Jim for letting us know about this book, Small Town Sins.
Right.
He said it was one of the best crime books he's read this year. So I took notice.
Wouldn't even qualify with genre. It's just one of the best. And I read like 150, 200 new novels a year.
Nice.
So when I saw that, I was like, holy shit. Let me get this book. And so and now we are here. Now we're talking about it. So right. Ken, would you do me a favor? Would you let our listeners know what they can expect when they open up this book?
It's the story of three people in a small town, a fictional small town in Pennsylvania, sort of a dying coal steel town, of which there are many, even though this one is fictional, there are many of them. And the three people get caught up in crimes. And according to the jacket, those crimes could cost them their lives. So that's the quick version of it. And it's been a bit of a whirlwind to write.
It's a whirlwind to read, although it's a very, very fast read, super fast. And so in Small Town Sins, you transport readers to Locksburg. First, is that a real place?
No, it is not.
Okay.
It's based on a couple of small towns. I went to college in a small town in Pennsylvania called Shippensburg University in Shippensburg, PA, and spent a lot of times in small towns, Harrisburg, Shamokin, all those ones. And,
it's funny that you
amalgamation of all
Harrisburg is a small town. But so Locksburg's small Pennsylvania town, in the middle of nowhere, that we from New Jersey would call, and I laughed when I saw it in your book, Pennsyltucky, or the Boonies. So I know you're from Pennsylvania, but what specifically attracted you to this particular region of the state rather than cities like Philly or Pittsburgh as the ideal setting for your character's narrative?
I grew up in Philly. I never left Philly until I was 18 or 19. And when I say never, I mean never. I think I went down the shore, down the beach in New Jersey a few times, but I was a street kid. I grew up in Philadelphia, Roxborough section, if anybody's familiar with the area. I never left it. Then went away to college to Shippensburg, which has 7,000 people in the whole town. And there I am off the streets of Philly. I go to Shippensburg. And one of the first mornings I'm there, I'm woken up by a sound, and I don't want to know what it is. Clip, clop, clip, clop. It's the Amish going by in their buggies. And for a guy like me, again, off the streets of Philly, to be woken up by the Amish, I was perplexed. I was confused. I didn't know anything. And within the space of 3 weeks, I absolutely fell in love with the town. And had friends from around the area and used to spend a lot of time after college hanging out with them, going back to the towns. Then I moved back to Philly and eventually moved to Manhattan and completely forgot all about it until just prior to COVID. My daughter was looking at colleges. So we did the whole Pennsylvania tour. We went around again and all those memories came flooding back. And I said, this is it. This is where I'm going to set the novel. And that's how it came about.
So, all those colleges, Penn State, Penn, never Rutgers, huh? Never thought about Rutgers.
Oh, you're a Rutgers guy too. Yes, I live in Princeton Junction, which is
it's not that sad of a tale.
I know.
Right down from Rutgers. No, she went to see Bloomsburg, Penn State, Westchester, and several other colleges, and then wound up going to Connecticut to Sacred Heart University too. So she never did. She did not go to Pennsylvania, but it was nice to go around the state.
So that set you up though for creating the story. So
yes,
so did Locksburg precede the creation of Nathan, Callie, and Andy, or did they come first in your creative process?
Two things happened, which I owe my daughter for. Not only driving around Pennsylvania and seeing these small towns, but also as I'm driving around, I have to find this news story. I can't even remember where I was reading it, but I read a news story about a fireman who was arrested for stealing something from a building he had gone into inspect or to put out a fire. I can't remember what it was. But when we're driving around, staying overnight in a couple of hotels, I read this story and I said, wow, not only do I have to set the story here, this is one of the stories I want to tell. So they both sort of came around together. The character, I like to think that the town is sort of a character in itself. And, but they both came about because I was driving around Pennsylvania.
Interesting. All right, Jim, you're up.
I have to say, even before I read the novel and I didn't know anything about you, but I remember closing the book and thinking, A, someone around my age, and you're around your age, wrote this, and B, I bet this person spent some time in a newsroom. And the reason I thought those was because all the novels I've read by older people and journalists tend to just start. There's no throat clearing. There's no info dumping. There's no preamble. Let me set things up here. You just dive right into the story, and there's just a total. You're off to the races, and a lot of economy. So once I started looking at some interviews I found of you online, and I thought, oh, of course. So I wonder, to what extent does the discipline of editing and working in journalism inform you as a fiction writer? What good habits did that engender in you, and what bad habits maybe would that have stripped away from you?
Let me go way back. I get out of college. I promised the world that I'm going to be the next Hemingway. I'm going to write brilliantly, and we all know how this story went. I couldn't get anything published. I had a little success in theater, but I could never publish a novel. 5 or 6 years later, I'm going to write it this time, and I'm going to be the next Faulkner, and we all know what happened. I don't mean to be self-deprecating here, and I don't know how good a writer I am, but I know I'm a decent editor because I get paid for that, and I've gotten paid for that for 19 years. And I said to myself, yeah, and I even wrote down this where you could see, I wrote down the word you said, throat clearing. I used to throat clear. I used to spend, 10 pages telling the backstory about how this guy stubbed his toe. And I said to myself this time, and by the way, I don't think I'm exaggerating. I said, I can't write a novel. I can't keep doing this. I can't spend so much time and use all this time writing the novel and go nowhere. So I don't know if I could write it, but I know I can edit it. So what I did is I just sped through it. I absolutely sped through it. I tried to write it like I would write a news story as fast as possible. I wrote the book in probably 5-ish months and spent 2 or 3 leisurely months editing it. And I edited it to where I would have conversations that would run, 2 or 3 pages, and I would condense them down to 2 lines where they needed to be. So your question was, how has the newsroom affected it or added to it? Sometimes I joke, I didn't write this novel. I edited this novel. And I think that was the best thing I could have done. All the other I would go to a sentence. I would write 2 sentences, then go back and spend 10 minutes sharpening them and everything. Or I'd be like, oh, what's the capital of Zimbabwe? What do I need to know that? So I'd go online to find the capital of Zimbabwe and then spend 3 hours in a rabbit hole, ordering stuff off Amazon.
He's ordering stuff off Amazon.
I'm telling you, that's the way it would happen. I said, don't worry about it. You don't know the capital of Zimbabwe, put Philadelphia and keep going and edit it later. So it's not too much of a stretch to say, yeah, I wrote this novel, but I really edited this novel.
It's interesting to hear you say that because there's such a flow to this novel that knocked me out, that there's an incident and then there's another incident that flows naturally from the other incident. What I noticed in that, as somebody who I edit manuscripts for a living, and there's a total absence of scaffolding. You know, if you sat down and plotted this out, I would have been surprised to see that, you know, that you had an outline and index cards and Post-it notes all over your walls, because it feels so naturalistic. And I think I understand a lot of the comparisons to A Simple Plan by Scott Smith, not only just because of the bag of money angle, but because there's just such a flow of incident to incident that makes total sense. Like when Nathaniel hooks up with Lily at, you know, both in high school, and then they hang around the same town, and of course they're going to drift into each other's orbit again, because that's perfectly logical. And also all the calamities that strike Callie and Gabriella, the teenage girl who's dying on their way out to see the ocean. There's just, you know, I could absolutely. It's such a pleasure to read a novel that when you're 10 or 20 or 50 pages in, I had no idea how this was going to end. I didn't know who was going to live, who was going to die,
who was going to
jail, who was going to get stabbed or shot. And that was so exhilarating. There was nothing templated about this book. And I don't even know if there's a question.
I will say
that's my review.
That really is, that's what I say to people when people ask me what kind of fiction or what stories I like. I love when you don't know what happened. I love James Bond, but we always know James Bond's going to live, and we always know these certain things are going to happen. And, and I love that. I did have a slight outline on this. I had a couple of, you know, this is going to happen roughly. This is going to happen. Mm-hmm. So I had a light outline and just went as fast as I could. I mean, I didn't. After it was done, I didn't cut so much, you know, a couple thousand words here and there too, but I like to think I kept it somewhat tight, edited it down, and there I was.
Yeah, love it.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. You really tap into a number of different familiar topics. I mean, poverty, crime, you know, the family dynamics, illness, addiction, recovery. How did you approach integrating all those together in the storyline? Because any one of those could have been the entire theme of the book. So, you know, what sort of techniques or what were you conscious of trying to meld all those together and still keep the pace going?
I absolutely look. I lived in New York for 8 or 9 years. I love New York, and I find it just a fascinating town. And I go in this city to work too. But sometimes it seems that, gosh, that's almost every story is either set in New York, and you know, where someone pays $30 for a drink, and no one talks about the money. I think when you go to a small town, you realize there's a lot of life, and there's a lot of interesting things going on here too that are never seem to be taught. Look, we know there's still a lot of small. I don't want to say there's no good small town fiction, but it seems to me everything. There was a point I was reading about 2 or 3 years ago that everything was set in New York or Washington, D.C. And I wanted to try to move out of that. I think I got off your question. But that's one of the reasons I wanted to set something in a small town. And also, money is such an important thing to talk about and address. And some books, shows, anything, never seem to address it. I mean, there are people, if they don't get $10 of gas, they're not going to go to work. And if they don't go to work, they're not going to pay the bills. And if they're not going to pay the bills, they're going to get kicked out of their house. And when I read something, and maybe it's just my father was very affected by the Depression. And maybe that's still in me. But when I see somebody in a New York story go eat at a 5-star restaurant and not worry about the bill, that always strikes me as a little bit strange. I'm like, doesn't anybody seem to worry about money? And and then what happened?
Restaurant week. That's when I would go to the expensive restaurants.
You know, and then what happens if you do the right thing your whole life? And all of a sudden, if you do the wrong thing, you could get yourself out of your money worries. And who's to say? I'm trying to dance around the plot because I don't want to talk too much about the plot. But who's to say that if you do something wrong, it could make up for all the things that happened to you in the past?
Yeah,
I got off the subject because I had to circle the plot, but
no. So I'm notorious for giving away plot and stuff. So yeah, we definitely want to circle around it. But so Ken, each chapter heading has a name, so it's inviting readers to explore the array of life choices, both good and fraught with adversity, made by Nathan, Callie, and Andy. Mm-hmm. I'm intrigued about the evolution of their stories. Did one set of choices lead to the others, or did the narratives develop separately at different moments in time? Like, were these stories complete with both the positive and the darker decisions, like when you sat down to write it?
All three stories are based on true stories. Again, we don't want to talk about the plot, but one of them is about a fireman. You learn in the first chapter who is in a building and stumbles upon and takes something he shouldn't have stumbled upon and take it. But it's a true story. And the other two have the roots in true stories as well. I did not write them separately. Yes, they're intertwined, and it goes Nathan, Callie, Andy, and that's just the way I wrote it. So I didn't write them and split them up later on. I wrote the book essentially how it is. I think once or twice I skipped ahead to write a couple of notes and do some stuff like that. But no, the book is pretty much just how I wrote it.
Did you know the beginnings and the endings and needed to fill in the middles, or like how was that?
Yeah, someone had asked me what's harder, what's the hardest thing to write, the beginning or the end, and I had to be a smart ass and say the middle.
Yeah,
because
yeah, but that's true.
It really is. And but no, I had a very light outline. It probably fit on one piece of paper, and I had a light outline of where I wanted them to go and what was going to happen. And remember, in chapter 6, this has to happen, and then I would just write it from there.
I'll just say though, real quick, I never felt like I was in the middle. There was never a point where I felt like I was in the middle, muddling through something. There was no boring parts. Like, you didn't write anything boring.
Thank you very much.
Jim, I think
you're up.
One remarkable aspect of your personal story to me as an author is that you sold a debut novel at the age you are, and the big publishing, New York publishing, I think we can own this, is kind of obsessed with youth and freshness and contemporary this and trend that. And I'm curious to know how you and your agent threaded that needle with a crime fiction book that is almost entirely trope free, and definitely not readily market friendly, at least in the conventional view of things. And I'm interested in this book's journey to your agent saying, yes, this is one I can sell, to the actual sale.
He did tell me, I'll jump ahead real quick. He said I could sell, when I first signed on with him, he says I could sell this in three weeks, and he was wrong. He sold it in 2 weeks and 6 days. And I gave you some of the backstory, how my daughter looked at colleges. I wrote it over 7 months. I sent it out to a couple of agents. I did get one hit who said, yes, I'd like to represent you. And then my current agent came along, and he looked at me, he said, sign with me, and I think I could sell it in 3 weeks. And like I said, he gave himself a day too much. He sold it in record time. I did bring up, when they asked about marketing, how are we going to market this, and what's interesting about you that we could sell it for? When I said, look, at the time I was 53. I said, oh, I'm 53, and no one seemed to bat an eye. I was very surprised at that. But they really didn't bat much of an eye, and they said, oh, what else do you got? And I kept trying to put off. If you look in my author bio, they always say, oh, when he was a boxer in Philadelphia. Let me tell you, I wasn't so much a boxer in Philadelphia as I was a punching bag in Philadelphia. I used to spar with pros who used to snap my ribs and give me a concussion. I remember walking out of the gym twice with a concussion. And so to call me a boxer is nice. And I had a couple of wins as a amateur. But they were more interested in things like that. They were more interested in my boxing and maybe my journalism and and how, and it was, since I've reviewed a lot of things too. Oh, now the critic is going to write something, and people have done that too. When I wrote for the theater, they were like, oh, now a critic gets to be critiqued. So they were more interested in that. They did give a little nod to the age. They said, oh, okay, that's interesting, but it wasn't a major detriment to me. It wasn't really talked about. I was very surprised at it. I'm glad you brought it up, but in my case, it wasn't too big a deal.
I got you beat. I was 54.
Ah.
Well, you just touched on something. Let's talk about this. Besides the amateur boxing, you've written plays that were produced in New York and Europe, but your day job is with the New York Times.
Right.
So most people think because of your profession that you would have had an easy time getting published. But I've seen an interview you gave that you tried publishing novels in the past and you couldn't even get an agent.
Absolutely.
So did you do something different this time? Or was this an accumulation of knowledge from those past speed bumps that kind of came together?
Look, there's no two ways about it. I think those earlier novels were just lifeless. You said, Jim, throat clearing. I would spend 10 pages and no one wants to read you. 10 pages throat clearing. I think the novel was better than anything I had written before. I think that's first and foremost.
Yeah.
I am surprised. Yeah, being at the New York Times seemed to get me nowhere in the past. I say, hey, by the way, I'm a guy at the New York Times, and look, we all know it's about money. We all know it's about money. The book's got to sell. It doesn't matter if you're at the New York Times or not.
Right.
I will say too, I've gotten some really nasty. A couple of my plays were. It's a poor playwright who blames the critic, but I've gotten some reviews from people like, oh, he's at the New York Times. It's and take a shot at the Times through me. Also, I've seen some books from some of my colleagues at the Times I thought unfairly maligned because, they wanted to get a dig at the Times, or they wanted to think, oh, you should be better than this. You're a professional journalist. You should be better than this.
Right.
But, I think I can say with complete honesty that the Times, and I could show you dozens of rejection letters that the Times really seem not to have a lot to do with it.
How are those negative reviews? Have you gotten any?
On this? No, I'm shocked. But I don't read a lot of them. Oh man, did you see what happened last week? I'm on Twitter because I have a friend who only uses Twitter. So I was emailing back and forth with him. And all of a sudden I see blip, 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 and my Twitter starts lighting up. And I'm like, whoa, what's going on here? Harlan Coben.
Nice.
Said, great new debut novel by Ken Jaworowski. And by the way, I don't even know how he got the novel, but he said, great new review. You'll love Small Town Sins, and you'll love these three characters. So
wow,
that's really, really great to see. And again, I don't know him. I don't know anything about him, and
he's from Jersey. He's from Jersey, so it's okay.
But he is from Jersey. You are correct.
He's sort of successful.
He's sort of successful. Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
So Ken, as I read Small Town Sins, it reminded me how it seems that people are always trying to escape something. In your debut, Andy is evading his past as a junkie in a horrible tragedy. Nathan seems to be fleeing life itself, his marriage, his job, Pennsylvania. Callie has spent her life avoiding the mirror and the stares of others. I know these characters are fictional, although they felt real because their lives were very believable. But do you think humans are cursed to never be content? That we're hardwired to constantly seek a better life, a better job, a better anything different than our current circumstances?
I could not. I'm not even going to answer because I think you said it perfectly. Okay, I'll answer. I think you're absolutely right. We always have that hole in us that we want to fill, and we all, the new car will do it. But no. Down the new car, the new job will do it. I get out of this town, I'll do it.
Yeah.
And I think we're all that way. And not to make some big grand statement, but I was just having this conversation with my daughter, college-age daughter. Again, I don't want to rant and rave about social media, but it seems on social media, especially for young people, that everyone shows you their perfect life.
Oh yeah.
Everyone shows you, hey, look at this great vacation, and look at this meal I have in front of me, and that's great. And my boyfriend is great, and this, and then it leaves you thinking, wow, why don't I have the perfect life? And they all seem to, and everybody seems to be reaching for something, and in a lot of cases, that's a good thing. Of course, we always want to reach for more. We want to be better people. We want better things for our children, our families, and our careers. But when that starts to take over, then things
chasing happiness. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Would never content, and not that we should be content. Mm-hmm. Should always, like you said, strive for something better for ourselves. It doesn't have to be material though. And I think that's what we get caught up in, the material aspect of the grass is always greener on the other side.
Yeah. If I look at her Facebook feed or whatever, and everyone's saying how great things are and how and what, and you can't help but think, if their life is great, why isn't my life great?
Yeah.
But
we see it in healthcare too.
Yeah.
What's interesting about your three characters, Nathaniel, Callie, and Andy, is they don't have the luxury of fronting anything. I mean, Callie's not going to post any selfies, and Andy, as much as he loves his wife and child, he's got. I can't see him thinking, I've got something to brag about here, and I really kind of, as you were talking earlier, I latched onto the metaphor of the punching bag versus the boxer. And you've written about three punching bags who, in some way, find a way to think that they might be boxers a little bit. They might have a chance to counterpunch a little bit. And I think that's really the emotional center of Small Town Sins is these everyday people, these losers by self-definition or society's definition, being given something in a very naturalistic way to grab onto and escape metaphorically, if not geographically. Is that something you were thinking about, or did that all just kind of come to you in that blur of writing?
Related to that, someone asked me the other day, I was at a reading in Philadelphia, and they said, "Oh, what is your message? What do you mean? What is this?" And I couldn't be more honest. I said, the message is up to you. I want to tell a good story, and that's it. You go in journalism, you realize people read what they want to read into something. God, we'll do a political story, and the right will say, you bunch of liberals, and the left will say, you've sold out to the right. And people read the same exact story, and they take it the same way. So I had no overwhelming meaning. I really wanted to tell a good story. But one thing I am interested in is what happens when and I have to use the air quotes, what happens when a good person does a bad thing? Or conversely, what happens when a bad person does a good thing? I think we all think we're good people, but what happens if something comes along and it's not really the good thing to do? And it's a little bit of a cliche to say there's so many gray areas. If you would look at Andy, if you were to look at him sometime in his life, he's a guy who says, I used to steal old ladies' pocketbooks, and I used to do this for drug money. And if you looked at him, we would immediately dismiss that person. Like, what a horrible person. And then if you looked at him when he was striving to take care of a wife and a disabled child, you'd be like, what a great person.
Yeah.
Right.
It's all about when you catch us. Heck, I think I'm the greatest father in the world. I'm absolutely the best father in the world. But you catch me when I'm screaming, don't do that, or my daughter backs up and hits the mailbox with the car, and I'm screaming, Jesus Christ. And the neighbors come out and see me screaming with the mailbox in front of me.
Yeah.
I look like I'm the worst parent who ever walked the
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're calling the cops and taking you away.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, New York Times editor, arrested for screaming and kicking his car.
And I'm sure you're saying things a little bit more powerful than Jesus Christ is pretty powerful, but more powerful than that. More.
Darn it, of course. So if I am interested really in one thing, in the book, it's what happens when good people do bad things, and what happens if the word sin is there, and sin implies that, you'll pay for it. And what happens if what you pay doesn't match the sin?
Right.
What happens? I mean, there's people, we all know some people overpay for this. We know that some people in this life are horrible people, and they continue to get ahead. They amass great fortunes. Yep. And we know conversely that we know people who have done the best they could their whole life and done so much, and they still end up in a hole. And you grow up in a small town and you've done the best all your life, but the town lets you down. The industry moves out. That's not your fault. That's not geographic. The economy, in a sense, did that. You've worked hard your whole life, and now you're being let down. What happens? What happens when these things happen to us?
Well, let's ask you this question then. You've got this debut novel, and now you got Coben giving you props. I mean, does this mean that you've caught the novelist bug, or was this getting it out of your system, or kind of where do you think you're landing now based on today's date?
I am the least religious person I know, but I am the most superstitious. That's why I'm knocking here. Just last week, I submitted my new book. This is planned, and look, we all know the publishing industry. We all know everything's a crapshoot. Yeah. We know anything could happen. But I wrote a second one, also set in Locksburg, and with the idea, who knows if it's going to work, of having it be a trilogy, 3 books set in this small town. They do not have the same characters, although occasionally characters are referred to from the earlier novel. But I have completed the second one. It was a year and a half from the time this was the time it was bought in March of last year, and it was published in August of this year. So it was a year and a half. So I didn't sit around for a year and a half. I wrote the second one. So we'll see what happens.
Oh, well, I guess he answered our question. He's got the bug now.
He does.
Yeah, the bug.
Of course, Harlan just gave him a big booster injection there too. Probably.
Yeah, I am very superstitious, and I'm not. I've mentioned it a couple of times to a couple of people in an interview, so it's safe to say. But I finished the second one and have submitted it, and we'll see what happens.
Sweet.
So I know you're superstitious, but I wonder if you could tease the working title.
Oh, I'll tell you what the working title is, but I'm gonna make a fool out of myself because I can't do anything good without making a fool out of myself. To tell you what the first title of this one was. The first title of this novel is the most pretentious, cheesy, that I have to embarrass myself and tell you what the title of this was because I have to.
We do this every interview.
I love how he prefaces this.
the title of this, and this is the thing. I loved it. I loved it so much. And when you look back, you only realize, like I was in high school. Like, what did I do then? The first title of this book was "The Second Girl I Ever Kissed." And it's from a line that Nathan says. He says, "You were the second girl I ever kissed." And my agent and publisher are like, "Yeah, we probably don't want to do that." And
we'll circle back on that.
And exactly. And then I said, "Oh, okay, it's going to be small town something." And then we came up with small town.
Oh, yeah, nice.
To answer your question, this one, I'll run it by you. Maybe this is pretentious. Maybe I'm again being pretentious, but I think this is a good title. I'm going to take a vote. It is "What About the Bodies?"
With a question mark or without?
No question mark.
No question mark.
What about the bodies? Okay, maybe not. But
no. I think that it might grow on me.
Yeah, that's the bodies. It's like
because it depends on who's asking.
True, Michael. True.
Right. If you're a medical examiner, it could be one thing. If it's a buddy, it could be something else. I mean, there's a whole lot of.
Could be the meth guys.
Could be the guy, could be the killers, right? I mean, so yeah, no, I like it.
So that is I will generously say that is the working title of the.
All right.
And we all know how the first working title went. It went from the.
Listen, Ken knows once you sell the book, the title's whatever the publisher
don't have any
says
input.
it is.
Sorry.
I remember when I was talking to them, like, "Are you tied to the title?" I'm like, "No, not really tied to the title." I'm like, good.
Just want to sell it. Just want to sell it. Yeah, but I want to raise the glass, Ken. You have completed the traditional portion of our interview here. Now we're going to ask you we call it the lightning round. There's nothing lightning about it, but it's our way of ending the interview on a silly note. So we're going to ask you some silly questions, and there might be some serious questions in there as well. I'll get us off to a start. I said, my first question, I got a good chuckle when I read how Andy and Kate used the phrase freaking Jane Kimmel. I could be wrong, but as a writer, I felt that phrase came from your life. So what does Ken say when he doesn't want to blurt out a curse? Do you have a freaking Jane Kimmel phrase that you and your family use, or you and your wife?
I use oy vey all the time, which is not a curse, but the whole geez, or I go Jeebus Christmas or something like that. Anything cheesy that comes to mind. Just the other day, I was walking through the dining room and I hit my toe, on the table and screamed out. I'm like, Jesus! I'll just make crazy sounds. I grew up in a very, very Catholic household where you should not do that.
Of course you did. Yeah, I know.
So sometimes I'll even say it, Jesus, out of spite. But
Jesus, Mary, and Joseph.
Yes,
when you know it's bad. So there's another phrase in Small Town Sins that caught my attention. It's the German word that Callie's father was fond of.
I love it.
It's a face that could use a smack, and I couldn't in a million years pronounce it because I'm Italian and I'm from Jersey. But I'm hoping you can. And it's back and then a whole bunch of consonants and like a vowel here or there.
I'm going to look it up right now. It's not only that, it's translated sometimes as a face that needs a smack or a face that could use a fist.
God, I think my brother would say that to me all the time.
That could
explains a lot.
Can you? I don't know. Can you pronounce it? Can anybody pronounce that word? That's not German.
I'm looking phonetically as phonetically I can. It's back Pfeifengeist. Back Pfeifengeist.
Certainly not how it's spelled.
No.
And according to the word of the week, Germany and the USA, it's German's unique words back Pfeifengeist is a face that's badly in need of a fist.
God, I love it.
And don't we all know people like that?
If it was easier to pronounce, I would say it all the time. All right. So here's my last question. If you had to boil it down to one trait, what do you believe is the fundamental difference between a city guy and a small town guy?
The fundamental, I don't know if maybe there's a German word for it that could sum it up, but you really can, from the time I've lived in Philadelphia and the time I've lived in Manhattan, you really can disappear in a city in no time. And I lived in Manhattan for 8 years in an apartment. I saw my next door neighbor a total, I think, of twice in the same apartment building.
Yep.
That's not going to happen in the small town. You're going to see them in the same. By the way, to back up just for a second, I don't believe there's such a major difference. I believe we're all this. Look, we all have fears. We all have things that make us happy and sad, and we all. I hate to go Pollyannish. By saying we're all alike, but I really believe we are. That being said, there are some major differences, and I think you can disappear into a city much, much easier than you could in a small town. And it really is true in the small town. People do know what you've done, and they know your past, and you can't, if you stay in that town, you can't always run away from it.
Yeah, you can't reinvent yourself.
Yeah.
Jim, you had some questions to ask Ken here?
You kind of already answered this with the Harlan Coben anecdote, but I'm curious. Is there a big deal author whose generosity during this whole saga since the release of the book has surprised you or hit you out of nowhere?
Yes. Thank you so much for asking. Because while I was waiting to jump on this call, I finished Ken Bruin's the dramatist. Oh my God, I was I was going through one of those moments that no one was answering my emails for Blurbs. And I was going through one of those moments that This is a disaster. I can't even believe it's got published. It's going to go bad. Everything's going down the toilet. I fell into a really bad funk, and not just for a day or two. It lasted like a week or two. And Ken wrote me, and I don't know if everybody, I love this guy. He's an Irish PI writer. Jack Taylor is his private investigator, and I love him. Ken wrote me the absolute nicest email, gave me a great blurb for it, and we talked quite a bit about some stuff. I sent him a copy after it was published. He sent me another email, and then, I don't want to know if I could. I don't know if I'm giving away. I don't think I'm giving anything away personal. But his wife, who says has been having some problems reading. She said for the past couple of years, her eyesight and everything. She's like, but Ken forced this. And so I'm saying his wife emailed me too. And she says, he forced this on me. And he said, I had to read it. I had to tell you. So to answer your question, yes, Ken Bruin and his wife were so great. And they just pulled me out of this little mini depression I was, and they were great. And then all of a sudden, it was like this dam broke. All of a sudden, within the space of about 5 days, all the emails started coming in. I'm also a big fan of Willie Valutin. Speaking of small town guys who write great around small towns, about small towns. He was really, really nice too. And I'll give you one last great story too. I don't have a copy. Gosh, I'll leave a copy of my own novel around here too. But right on top is the blurb from Laura Dave, who sold 2 million copies of the last thing he told me. She sold 2 million copies of that novel. If I was to ever have children again, boy or girl, they are going to be Laura Dave Jaworowski. And I'm going to tell you why. I emailed her, can you blurb my novel? She wrote me back a nice email. No, I cannot. She says, I'm in the middle of, it was just on, as a matter of fact, it broke like every record on Apple TV, Apple Plus, the miniseries based on her book. So she sells 2 million copies. She says, I'm in the middle of rewriting the script. Julia Roberts was supposed to be in it. Julia Roberts dropped out, and they had Jennifer Gardner. She's like, we got to make some tweaks to the script. I wish I could do it, but I can't. I said, thank you very much. That's great. 4 weeks later, I get an email from her saying, you know what? We finished up the script early. If you'd like me to take a look at your novel, I could still do it.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Can you believe that? She got back to me when she did not have to.
Wow.
And she says, yeah, I can look at it. And by the way, she did say too, no promises. She said, no promises. But if you send me it, I think I can get to it. We have her using that great word. Of course, the word is cherry picked. An extraordinary novel, and we put extraordinary in the thing. So those, if I have to tell you any stories about Blurbs, Ken Bruin was great. Willie Valutin was extremely nice, and Laura Dave. Like I said, if I had another boy, Laura Dave Jaworowski would be his name.
Tough day in the playground.
That was a good name.
All right, let me ask my questions here. All right, first one: who is the greatest athlete to ever come out of Philadelphia?
Joe Frazier. And by the way, Joe Frazier was not born; he was born in South, but is widely considered Philadelphia.
Yeah. I honestly, I would have went with Rocky Balboa.
Oh Jesus! But I talked a little bit about boxing, and I met Joe once. I met his son too.
Oh, that's cool.
And he was. I mean, I was rewatching scenes of Ali Frazier 1 a little while ago, and what a guy, and what a place in history. Yeah. How about you? What do you think? Who's the best to come out of Philly?
I don't know.
Mike's from Mikey. Have you ever been on the East Coast?
No, never been on the East Coast.
No,
never.
He's a central mountain guy.
I did for a year when I was a kid live in Monroeville, Pennsylvania. So just outside of Pittsburgh. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Dude, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I've been all over the place.
I known you. I didn't know that.
Well, because the FBI was after us. All right, number 2. All right. Who was the most hated professional athlete to ever come out of Philadelphia?
I don't know about athlete, but I can tell you the coach. What was his name? Was it Buddy Ryan? Buddy Ryan was he was the coach of the Eagles. This is how bad Eagles fans are. I believe it was Buddy Ryan. I think it was. He left Philadelphia as coach of the Eagles.
Yeah.
He went to Kansas City, I believe, and he was in a restaurant one night and he was choking on a pork chop. Someone gave him the Heimlich and he spit out the pork chop, and that was that. When he came back to Philly, now that he was an enemy of Philadelphia because he went to another team, the Philadelphia fans pelted him with not one, not 10, but hundreds of pork chops threw at him as he was running.
That's expensive.
That's very expensive. So who was the most hated? He was a coach, so
he was a pretty universally not liked guy.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So
all right. You have to give us the Eagles finish for the season. What's their
well, it's better than the Jets.
What's their win loss for the Eagles?
I look, they almost went all the way. Out of what, 16 games? 16?
17 now.
17.
18?
Is it 17 now?
17.
Yeah, they started that last season, 17.
Okay, 17. They are going 14-3.
Wow.
I mean, look, I think they got scared enough this time. Look, they almost blew the lead, but they're already 1-0. They almost blew the lead. I liked it. I liked it. They got a little scared. They got to get back up on the horse. Look, they've been.
Okay, people, 14-3. If he doesn't get it, the blurbs go away.
Hey, I think Jim, you have I think you had two questions you wanted to ask.
Yeah. Sorry.
I asked this of anybody of my approximate vintage, and I always get a funny answer. Namely, what cheesy song from high school would you turn up and sing along if you were alone in the car?
Oh God, I had a girlfriend who just loved Journey. And every time I hear anything but Journey, even though Don't Stop Believin' has gotten completely overplayed in the past couple of years, but anything from Journey, and I think back to those days in high school, God. So, you know what? I will go with that because she loved.
Got the mullet, got the.
And the other one, this is from a conversation my wife, who's from the East Coast, and I were having a few months ago. And I'm from Washington State. I'm a Puget Sound native. I don't know jack about cheesesteaks. And she was trying to explain to me what distinguishes a good cheesesteak from a bad one. And I thought I would throw that out to a native.
I'll tell you exactly what it is. Everybody thinks it's the cheese of the steak. It's not. It's the roll. The roll is what makes the cheesesteak. You get there's a place, Mama's Cheesesteak. I'll give them a shout out, right? And they're not even in Philly. They're actually about 300 yards right over the line in a place called Ballakinwood. But anyway, they make only something like 200 rolls. They have a baker like a couple blocks away. And when they run out of the rolls, they close the store every day. So they only make as many cheesesteak as they have rolls for. So that's what makes the best cheesesteak. People say it's the cheese and steak. It is the roll.
Amen.
There it is. That's it.
That's right.
That's how we're going to end it. Cheesesteak because it's Philly. Small Town Sins. It's already out in stores, folks. Go pick it up. Jim says it's his favorite read of the crime novel of the year for him. I will second that. This was super fast to read, and it hits you. It hits you hard, and it actually stays with you. And I can't wait to see what you do next in Locksburg.
Yeah, boy, working titles.
So let's raise a glass. Ken, thanks for coming on the show. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
See you, boys.
Hey, boys.
Yes, sir.
Mike.
Yes.
We had Ken Jaworowski.
We did.
Small Town Sins. Jim, thank you for helping co-host on this because you're the one that let us know about this book. Dude, it was a fantastic read. Super fast. There was no, and I don't think I've ever said this about any other author except for Brad Thor writing a thriller. There was no fat in this story. It was
just on the go, huh?
No, if anything, I wanted more. It's killing me not knowing what happened to Callie.
Yeah, true. So let me bring in the everybody else. There we are.
Yeah.
Raise a glass here.
Have a try.
Ken, thanks for coming on the show. Fantastic author. Can't wait to see what he does next. Jim, thanks for co-hosting on this. We miss you, Sean.
Yep.
Mike, thanks for getting here after saving people's lives.
And I probably should take a shower now.
Probably. Cheers.
Cheers.